Hey, let's go ahead. It is 7:01 and we can begin. And I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. A good looking crowd here. Just so some programming notes here, and I see some new faces too, by the way. So make sure you introduce yourself in the chat. We haven't seen, let us know who you are and where you're from. And Thursday night's chat will be with Stacy Heron, who is the leader of EVSC's Virtual Academy, and she'll be talking a little bit about online discipline, creating that environment, creating those rules, those norms, and then how to kind of navigate that. I know her situation's a little different than what we are looking at, but I think that we can get a nice starting point from there, and then we can kind of let that go and see what we need to find out for next year. So that'll be on Thursday night. All right. And then I am working on getting someone in here for special ed, because I know that was a need that several of you said you wanted. So we're working on getting somebody in for that here soon. Okay. If you are not following along on Twitter, please make sure that you are following us on @SoWeLead. And we are still taking requests for your walk-in song. If you could have a walk-in song to your classroom, what would it be? We've got a few out there already, and I will be making a playlist of all that and then sharing that out on Thursday. So make sure you get over there and you tweet out, yep, Welcome to the Jungle was one of the first ones that I thought of too. So, but I did, for those of you that really know me, I did sneak in a Taylor Swift song. So that'll be on the playlist as well. And make sure that you are checking out the So We Lead website, and JD just threw that link in the chat. There are tons of resources up there, a lot of things going on over there. And also, we're still developing the Google Field Day, which we had last year. Obviously, it will look a lot different this year, and we will be working on that. And as information comes out, we'll be throwing that out there. And I don't know if Tim's in here or not, but some of the others of you, shameless plug, make sure that you're kind of watching for the ICE conference connect information. iceconference.org. Is that the website, JD? Yes, there it is. Thank you. It's all official. Everything's up there on the website. They're going to start advertising that soon. There is going to be a killer list of speakers this summer, all free. You cannot beat that list on there. So definitely take a look at that list. Get yourself registered for that, because that is going to be some amazing stuff this summer. Yeah, actually, Nate, you're scheduled. You're slated to speak. You and your mother both, right? So that is going to be awesome. And I think Nate can attest. The list of there, that's A level. That's A list quality on there. There are some huge names on that list, so definitely check it out. So tonight, last week we were kind of talking about some of the needs we might have for professional development, and Natosha had said that she really wanted to hear some of those things, like what do people really need, not just for her building, but we as a group. And so I kind of co-opted that idea. And tonight, what we want to kind of talk about a little bit is what are the things that we as a group think we really need to be prepared to go back this fall. In whatever form we go back. Obviously, we've had some time. What did we learn that we needed to learn, right? And I know that Natosha's obviously looking for her own building, but I think that we can kind of push this list out both through So We Lead, other organizations, and into the districts. So what we want to do is we'll let Natosha introduce herself and kind of share what she was talking about this morning a little bit. In the chat, if you would put some things that you would really like to see some PD on, a brief description, or what is some things you would like to see. We'll be pulling those things in. We'll be talking about what those things look like, why we want some of those things, and maybe where we can find some of those resources. So Natosha, let me turn it over to you, let you get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natosha Bruner. I am an educator that has been both in the elementary and secondary setting. 7 years elementary, 7 years secondary. I am finished my second year as the assistant principal at Mount Vernon Junior High, and I am transitioning to Farmersville Elementary as the principal for the next school year. I'm very excited for the next step in the chapters I'm going through. Every transition has developed me in the process. And so I wanted a lot of your guys' reflection. I think for us to be prepared the next time around, there has to be that moment of reflecting on what we did, what we would change, and how we would grow and develop. We know we made mistakes because we are human, and that's part of the process. What can we learn from some of those mistakes we did? What are some things that we can improve on and grow and reflect? What I found in this process of going through this was when this kind of was thrown on us kind of quickly, I kept asking myself, if I was a teacher, what would I want for my assistant principal during this process? And so that opened up some things that allow me to see things in this pandemic that would have been missed if we hadn't done that. So I reached out to the staff, and we had a weekly check-in where they would share names with me of students that they already had concerns because they had them in class or they weren't hearing anything from them. And from opening up that door of opportunity and reaching out to parents, I found out that there was a lot of things going on in our kids' lives, from death of a family member with COVID to another having his main guardian in hospice, to having seizures at home. I mean, there was a gamut of things, and no food in the house, and just being aware that these needs were going on and supplying a bridge still between us, the school, and them. Coordinating with our guidance counselors to reach out and talk to our students that needed that additional support, but even the parents needed that support. I looked through your guys' reflections, and there are so many awesome areas that you guys reflected on that you would appreciate some more support. Now, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to have all the answers tonight. I'm hoping more to hear what are some things that you have, and what we'll probably find out is there are individuals right online now that are going to have some great reflections on that we can share and grow and develop from one another. One thing I did reflect on from a personal experience that we're going through, my son on May 1st had a burn injury that required us being transported from St. Vincent's emergency room to Riley's Children's Hospital. He's 17. It happened while he was working. And in the process of being up at Riley's, they were teaching me how to do debridement on my son, change wounds, do the dressings properly, bandage him all up in a 5-minute time frame. And then I'm supposed to do this when I go home myself. And I'm thinking, you know what? I did not go to school to be a nurse. You know, I haven't had the proper training. This is my kid I love and adore, and this is serious. If I don't do it right, he gets an infection, and it can turn quite the other corner very quickly. So I felt that moment of like kind of hopelessness in a way, and then it clicked, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what a lot of our parents feel in this moment. We are going to have those ones that, yes, maybe aren't always connected, but you have those parents that are working a job. They are trying to support their kid. They're trying to do their work. They're trying to help them in numerous ways, and they're overwhelmed. So that opened up some of your guys' questions, because some of you have put on there about parent, like time constraints, not sure what to do. And I did some little reflection and research, and I found out that this one teacher, she had came up with an idea of finding out what their home situation is by having a communication tool with the parent. So finding out what hours the parents are home, finding out when they can give support times to their kiddos, finding out if they have the ability to tie into technology. And these are things that it could be in communication form with the parent with a phone call, or it could be something now that we send home a paper at the beginning of the year that says, do you have internet connectivity where you're at? Do you have access to a device? So we know up front that our students have these restrictions and how we can help them. And Later, I'll put a link in our chat that you guys can go to where I found a couple of really good articles that have different points to reflect on. But I thought that was super cool that a lot of you guys were already very aware of that on the parent perspective, not just that they're not doing the work, but that they need support. John, and I noticed that has been something that has been talked about in the past too, in some of the reflections that have been posted in.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think, and just to kind of turn that just a little bit, you know, I think a lot of us in here are very familiar and comfortable communicating with parents, but we're really looking at a new partnership with our parents, are we not?
Yes, this has been totally transformative. Like, this isn't just when you're calling and you're having concerns about their behavior in the classroom. This is where you are asking them to join you in the effort. And I think when we can stop and reflect, and I do not think this needs to be an individual teacher task. I think this is where you guys are going to have wonderful opportunities to pull together as a school building and say, okay, we are creating true outside e-learning schools of partnerships with our parents. And how can we equip them to help with that? Now, some reflections I've had from parents that they did find beneficial. They said when teachers do recordings and they're walking through and they're doing the activity, that has helped them tremendously because they can pause the video and they can reflect over it. Yes, we can assume there's going to be parents that never click on that and do that. That's correct. That could happen. But you know what? We're optimistic people. If you're in public education, you can't help but be. We believe every child can succeed. We have to always keep that mindset. And the same way with our parents, we need to do that prep with them. And I've seen online too, if you guys just even hit in Google tutorials that teach parents Google Classrooms. And that is something reflecting on that we have talked about is how, and this was brought up to a universal platform. We all know, and I'm sure you guys have gone through this with classroom management, this applies a lot more in middle school sometimes. In elementary, it just seems like it happens naturally. But in middle school, if the teachers are on the same team, can have a universal system of expectations of you're tardy if you're not in the classroom, but some teacher might say you're tardy if you're not in your seat. If all those teachers can come together and come up with a universal system, it helps that kid stay accountable because they know exactly what's expected. So in that same token, like if as a team, if we all came together and had a universal system of how we utilize e-learning, that consistency is going to help the parent. So they're not going to so many different forums and platforms and trying to figure this out. There's just a unity. And then I think in a way that could take some pressure off you guys because you are coordinating together in that effort. And John, one thing I thought was super cool is our art and music teachers, and PE teachers were shooting out things like, hey, I really want some ideas of how to connect with lesson activities. And this came up in reflection with a teacher and another administrator, and possibly those teachers coordinate in with a grade level teacher when they are recording a lesson or doing something, and they come in with an activity that could be considered like a brain break from the lesson that's being taught, that ties into that fine arts, that ties into a PE activity, and then transition back.
Awesome. So let's take a minute and look at that piece there for a little bit, because I'm looking at that consistency piece. And so how do we develop that? And I'll kind of just lay this out there for the group or whoever. And Jeff, I know you've had a lot of experience trying to bring everybody up to kind of a level there a little bit. How do we build that consistency without being overbearing? Like, you will do it my way. I mean, you know, how do we approach that? Is that something that we need to start looking at, like how to collaborate as teachers together or best practices? And yes, Carrie, that was a really good article. I skimmed through it this afternoon. It was really interesting. Can you just, it's in the chat, can you just do a quick 30-second overview of it?
It is from an organization called TNT or TNTP, and it goes through and talks about at the very beginning the data behind how much student learning is likely lost during this closure time, 30% in language arts and up to 50% in math. So how do we get back students learning to accelerate again, and what implementation plans should we be expecting to do? And it just kind of walks you through, like, with the first frame of reference. Anytime you're approaching like an idea, ask yourself, is this good for getting student learning back on track? And it gives you a couple of standard questions. And if you can't answer yes, then toss out that idea, because there's going to be a lot thrown at us from all over the place. And some, while are good ideas, don't meet the intention of what's best for the students. And it needs to have that, go through that checklist. And it also does a really good, one of my favorite parts is it talks about bringing, as Natosha said, have a planning committee, get parents on that planning committee, get teachers on that planning committee, get admin on that planning committee, and get the whole spectrum of opinion, because without that, everyone's going to feel like they're not at the table, and then they don't have a buy-in to all of the different changes that are going to come their way, and you want to start off with buy-in. So it's a really long, well-written article, and so I just, even if you just skim through parts of it, it's got a ton of suggestions to just, as we think about what are we losing with student learning and how to get that back into the future.
Awesome. So, yeah, and this is I think kind of like, I would like to see that consistency. And I think that when, you look at what some of the challenges we've had, some of them are just processes, right? Like there wasn't a process in place and everybody's making it up as we go. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you want an administrator to say, here's how we're going to do it, here's the expectations, and that we start from there? Who thinks that is like the best way to go right now? Anybody? Yeah, kind of. Why, Jessica? What are you kind of waffling there a little bit? Jessica Hernandez. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm wanting to start it like while we're over the summer. I was like, I want to know what resources I need to start learning now. I want to know what, are we going to use synchronous learning, asynchronous learning? Do I need to be strengthening my video skills, or, what platforms do I need to start working on? I'm a special ed teacher, so I'm thinking about accommodations and how are we going to do that? So my brain is just reeling, and I can't like reel it in. So if I had a little bit of like structure, okay, we're going to be doing this, this, and this, it would help my brain.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, wouldn't it be nice if that was just off our plate? Because that's going to be I mean, I can't even think that that's a one PLC discussion. I mean, that's like a discussion that would go over and over and over again to create those norms and processes and standards and expectations. I mean.
And John, that's one thing that MSD, we have started in that directive. Our superintendent has began that process of starting to do some preparation with Google Classrooms, helping provide professional development out to teachers, that opportunity, and then also allowing our trained individuals to come in and assist teachers with setting that up in their classroom, even to the point where they could show them the best place to position the camera to record the lesson, so that no one feels lost for support. But if you do not have those resources in your district, the beauty of what you do have is in your school building. I know we as educators always pull together, and you have phenomenal resources of people. And this may be a great time to like shoot your admin an email and say, hey, if you need support with this for future e-learning, I feel comfortable being a resource for teachers and showing them how to do this. Or do you mind if we come collectively together and discuss what are similar platforms we can use to take off stress levels on our parents and teachers? But I like what Jessica said. I think teachers and we as administrators are the same way too, because we have district administration over us. We like to have some boundaries to give us an idea, so the picture's not so big in front of us. We're a little more focused, but the freedom to do it in our own unique style and way. I noticed like a lot of teachers were saying some things that came up while they were in the classroom online. And I think that there were some things when I was reflecting back, I was like, it sounds like that kid really had something going on outside of school because their behavior online it wasn't the established norm. And so having those supports where you can reach out to your administrator and say, I kind of need some help on this. We never want educators to ever feel like, don't come and tell us that you need support, because that is what we are here for, is to offer you those supports and encouragement.
So we're really going to have to build that community and really lean on each other a lot more then. Natosha, this morning you were, let me pull this back up here. One of the points you brought up this morning was having, and I'll paraphrase this, having a way to troubleshoot problems, both academic, technology, student concerns, and stuff like that. So as a group, what do we think that we need? What are some of the things, and I'll let Natosha kind of explain that a little bit, what she was thinking. But as a group, throw in the chat there, what kinds of supports do you think you need in case we go back distance learning again? Natosha, what kind of things were you thinking of when you were talking about having that support system in place?
So I would say, like, knowing up front, like in our situation, we're pretty well going with that whole Google format. But in other areas, I think knowing what are some resources that you would like to have some additional reflection on. Maybe you've heard another teacher speak about it and it's something that you're like, that would probably really work well for me. I did notice when I was looking through some past things here, they did share that there were things like with Zoom meetings that they would like in that area. There was also some people that mentioned about Google Meets. And I think what we run into, it's just like in our classroom, we have people on all different kinds of levels. So you probably have some people that are doing e-learning and they feel extremely comfortable and confident in what they're doing. And then we have others that haven't had that exposure. And for me, I'm going to be honest, like, I feel like us having a directive, what we are doing, and Google has set up it where you can have that checklist. You can have a weekly plan out. You can have the parent component in there. You can coordinate with your special education teacher and your general education teacher in that same classroom. I think it pulls bodies together more and makes a universal system of communication. I don't mean to sound like I'm a Google Classroom spokesperson here by any means, but I would be curious, what are some things that you guys have utilized that you're like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful for students with special education accommodations, or this is something very beneficial to students with social emotional. I would love to hear some of those specific areas that you guys have utilized and really enjoyed.
I see we have several special ed teachers in here. What's something have you seen something that's really been successful for you over the past few weeks? Or something you're like, well, that's a kernel of something that we could develop out more? Any of our special ed teachers got something they could share?
Hi, I'm Mary Anna Arney at Petersburg. And I was just going to insert that obviously there are so many different curriculums, and all these people are reaching out and saying, hey, we've got this for free, we've got this, but trying to narrow it down, kind of like what Jessica said, is just kind of really hard to say, oh my goodness, I want to try this and it's exciting, but man, when am I going to find time to do that? But a couple that I've really, really liked for social emotional, I've had a couple of book series and mindful kids stuff. And so I do have a lot of students that have social emotional goals. And that obviously through our directors and the directors of the state have even said those are just very hard to address. But stuff like curriculums like Social Express, they have it completely online. And they actually they call them webisodes, and they actually do the webisodes as the instruction piece, and then they have an interactive piece, which it can be like a game or a quiz and that kind of stuff. So that's more of the curriculum base. And then another thing I have found helpful is for them to see my face if I record videos of just reading like a book or doing an activity of just myself. And I am not comfortable in front of a camera at all, but I have noticed a lot of success with that, that they're seeing me kind of out of my comfort zone, acting kind of silly and whatnot, and doing some of these breathing exercises and that kind of stuff. So those are two things. And then like ABC, emotional ABCs is another platform that I've really found helpful with social emotional.
And I think Nate brought up a really good point too a minute ago, that it needs to be bite-sized, that, you know, sitting down for a 30-minute how to use Zoom, okay, but it's like something very bite-sized, and something I would personally like to see is less specific tool, more what is something you could do, you know, what is something additional, a different way of doing things. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with several of you were talking about Flipgrid, making that, you know, an alternative method of assessment, or maybe more authentic. What about that? Practical strategies. Yes, Nate. Excellent. What about that? What do you guys think of like things like Flipgrid and Seesaw, somebody mentioned, those kinds of things of making the learning more? Is that something we want to, or that we think we need to go start moving more toward?
I love that idea. And I think I've said this before. My only concern is so many of us are kind of experiencing this fatigue from being on so many like video conferences, and especially with our students that might struggle socially, emotionally, that might be difficult. And then we have that whole idea of once educators, you know, get onto something, it kind of has a tendency to get overused. Yes. So although I love Flipgrid, I love Google Meets, all of those things, I think it's so important to remember that that's not necessarily enjoyable to a lot of our kids.
Could that, Natosha, do you think that we could, and again, I think that we do have to be mindful about how much, because I know this is like my fifth video meeting today. My fifth one today. But do you think that we could leverage those kinds of like Flipgrid or Meet or something to create those connections with our special ed kids, our parents, stakeholders, if we do it in a limited fashion? Is there value in that outside of the academic?
I believe there is. Is it the same as face-to-face, one-to-one? No. But in our circumstances, we have to make the most. Like we're in a time period where we can't just push something off and say, well, it's not as good as the real thing. It's all we have right at this moment. So it's better than nothing is how I look at it. Because there are things we're going to have to look at. We have students that have speech therapy services. We have students that have RTI services. We have students that have OT, PT. I mean, we have numerous things, and we're going to have to look at how can we creatively offer that to our students if we can't physically be there. And can that be done in recordings? And can that be done where we make our parents feel comfortable that they can do it at home? And I think having that conversation with the parents, and I will be putting that link on this chat for you guys to look at, because it has a great component of there, talking to the parents about, do you have physical space? Having conversations with the parents about creating a place to do your classroom work. Now, they're going to already have experience with that now, but helping them figure out how to tailor and make this work. They even need to just hear from you guys like, hey, it's okay to stop the assignment if they are getting stressed and overwhelmed. Because I know there's those dedicated parents that will keep pushing the kiddo because they want them to have the assignment done, but their kid is melting and the frustration's getting high, and it should have quit 10 minutes ago and they're still trying to go 20 more minutes. So I think us just having those conversations with our parents. And I am going to give a shout out, a little plug here, because Courtney York, for those of you, and I highly suggest you get Courtney when you do talk about the special education component. She says that she does a lot of choice assessments. It's kind of like on a grid in a dock, and the kids can choose what activities they want to do. Now, that's not something you just have to do for special education students. You could do that. That's a great way of differentiation and hitting higher DOKs. This is a great idea for middle schoolers, elementary, or high schoolers, because you're giving students empowerment and choice. We know engagement is the key at all times. Though the platform has changed how we're doing it and they're not in the classroom, looking for those ways that we can engage with kids, that we can connect, making it authentic to yourself, because they can always see fake 2 miles away, but having that opportunity, it doesn't have to be something elaborate, but if it's quality and it comes from your heart, you're going to get so much out of those kids when you do that. Having brain breaks built in there, taking a moment and stop, just like how you would do in your traditional room. But I do think this was a great point that one of your teachers did bring up in what they typed online. They said they're having a difficulty, and so if you wouldn't mind if we have a little discussion on this, transitioning, because I think it's a real issue, from having their typical time in the classroom of 45 minutes, 55 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes of instruction, and trying to condense that into 15 to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear how some of you guys have done this and have found that to be beneficial, how you changed that mind, you were able to flip that switch and try to make that work for kids.
Okay, so has somebody had some success with that? Has somebody seen that they tried something and they were able to kind of reformat their work into a smaller bite-sized chunk? Has anybody done that and had some success with that? Yes, definitely. Remote is less is more, depth over breadth. I think that is definitely a key. Mary, what would you like to say? Mariana.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yes, I think the brain breaks were the big deal that I've been doing. Now, obviously, I've been doing all kinds of different platforms. So if I'm on the phone and can't see them or share my screen, it's obviously a little bit harder. But even one of my students had an OT goal of tying their shoe, and they had actually reached that goal. So it was taken out, but I knew that happened. So for a brain break, we ended up, I talked to the mother, and we gave options of doing lots of little sessions or trying to just kind of push to that limit and see with integrated brain breaks, because they have additional breaks as an accommodation. So we have to try to meet all those accommodations. So one thing I would have them do would be like, okay, now Joey, go into your room, run into your room and try to find a shoe that has a string on it that you can tie. And then he would run back. Okay, so now we're going to make sure the shoe's untied. And even though I can't see him, I could probably, I most likely am hearing that. But we've had a lot with like behavior issues. I even had a chair thrown at my phone. He was on the phone and was screaming and yelling and trying to hit his mom and all kinds of stuff. So at that point, we knew, less is more. We try to get what we can get done, and go from there. So I ended up having to meet with him like 15 minutes, like 6 times spread out, compared to one of my other kids, same kind of stuff. And it was one session for an hour and 10 minutes. So most kids, because I'm K through 2, so I don't have anybody above 2nd grade. I don't expect them to sit at a computer screen for an hour and 10 minutes, but with all these brain breaks and sharing the screen, they actually were more intrigued with everything and wanted to continue. So just different things like Loom videos are a big thing that we have been doing, so they can see us and pause it and go on. The only bad thing is if they don't have internet access, one of my biggest concerns for SPED and trying to get accommodations met is so many platforms are all internet. So it's hard to try to find some platforms that are not internet based that they can have, like Read Aloud. We've supplied some Read Aloud apps that they can download on their phone, and I have one that doesn't even have a smartphone. They just have a flip phone. So I had to call the person and read everything out loud for that paper and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
it's just a lot of different platforms are very helpful.
Bill, I feel like Mary and Nate are both allowing us to see like about finding out what is going on with our kids, how that really starts to transform us in our positions and roles. Because Nate shared, you know, he had parents that had lost their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mary sharing about that, those needs with the kiddos and adapting. You know, this is where I wish, I'm going to be honest, that people in political office were on this meeting and could hear what you guys are doing. Because I'm on the verge of a tear coming down the side of my face because you guys are awesome. Like, I mean, I think we're in a stressful time, but you are taking those moments and still knowing your kids and being there for your kids and something consistent. And I know you are feeling like it is not enough what you are doing, or you're worried because you're not consistently seeing all of those kiddos. But for what you just shared here, like you are impacting in the realm you're able to. I think it's, John, like we all struggle with this. Anyone that loves kids and went into education to change the world, we always want to do more. We just want to get one more kid. We want to make one more impact. And I think we sometimes along the process forget to pause for a minute and see all the ones that we are impacting, that we do have around us at that moment.
And you know, I think it's kind of telling a little bit. I've been saying this for a couple, 3 weeks now, that I think every kid now is a special ed kid. Like literally, we are making all kinds of accommodations. We are changing the way, you know, we're adapting, you know, for their needs. So I think it's telling that we have so many special ed teachers in this room right now. You know, that was specifically what they went to school for. They do that, mainstream inclusion, transitioning. So I see a lot of that, and I think it's rather telling. If I could kind of start putting some pieces together here, based on what we've been kind of talking about, I'm starting to see some themes that PD things that you guys really are kind of looking at. And I know these aren't like specifics; they're broader topics. But we're talking about the difference between taking something online to offline, having something that is similar, compatible, and can be switched one way or the other. This idea of kind of triaging what we do, kind of saying, here's what I got to do, here's what I want to do, and here's everything else. And, you know, maybe that's time frame, maybe that's content, maybe that's accessibility, resources. So I think that may be something. I think it kind of sounds like you guys are definitely looking for examples of what other people are doing, whatever that format might be, or whatever arena that might be. But it sounds like a lot of you are looking for what is somebody else doing. I keep seeing, you know, we had a lot of people have like some ideas that kind of, I use this, I use that, and I use this, you know, and you can't learn every tool. Obviously, you can't learn every tool. And so many tools have very similar functions with a small difference here or there. So those kind of big things like how are you just changing the way you are teaching? I think that is something. And then I think we're also starting to see a lot of this, like, I don't know how to put it exactly, but that kind of social emotional piece, right? The meeting the needs of the kids, the parents, the community, that outreach. Would you guys agree that those are kind of some of the main things that are bubbling up a little bit? I know those are broad topics, but is that kind of what sounds like you guys are looking for? I see a yes. I see a couple of yeses and some head nods. Okay. So then, yes, definitely social. Well, I think, and I think the social emotional piece right now is, I think it's taken on a different meaning, right? Julie, can you talk a little bit about that? Why do you think it's so important right now? Julie Cranning?
Okay, I have it on now.
Okay.
We're just seeing more and more parents losing either their jobs or people getting sick in their home. We've had 2 students lose parents right just days before we went out on quarantine. And so it's, we are offering counseling support to those students, but it's difficult virtually to do that, without one-on-one interaction. And those are just the few that we've heard about. There's so many other things. We've had a house fire and many, many things, but I just think that's going to be huge even when we do return, in the fall. There's going to be a lot of emotional needs.
Mm-hmm. And I'm, knocking on wood or something, I think we're a little luckier here where we are. We have not seen the things that other places, New York, California, Chicago, that they have seen. So, I mean, it's not as bad. But, you also think about how, schools were always that safe place, right? Mm-hmm. And now they don't have that safe place to go to a little bit. Natosha, if I can kind of bring it back to you a little bit, when we think about these large pieces, what is the best way, do we think, or maybe I just open up to the crowd here a little bit. How do we find these things? Do we start looking for experts? Do we lean on each other? What is the way that you think would be best to deliver some of these needs?
So we all know if you're trying to get across, if you get in your own boat and you start rowing away, you're going to get only so far. But I think if we come together collectively and we row the boat together, we're able to work as a team, as a family, and get to our destination more efficiently. So I would say that figure out, number one, and they've done this where I have been at, but I plan on following back up with the teachers as I'm making a transition into the new building. Get together as a school and discuss this and try to come up with some uniformity. I really think it will help relieve a lot of the pressure you put on yourself individually. And it will give you a way to just kind of zoom that in. I also think that it's very important, John, and I wanted to make sure when we get the opportunity to return, whenever that is, start building those relationships with your kids right away. Like, get it going, because we are really in an uncertain time as to what could peak or occur in the future. And if you build that relationship with your kiddos, they are more likely to want to get online and see your face or to get connected and do something. So one, that's going to be my big push. We're going to go in, we're going to build relationships, and we're going to communicate. I want to find out from all the parties involved, what are things that worked well and what are things that did not? How can we come together? But I want them coming to me and saying, hey, I need support in this. And I think that's huge on us as administrators. We have to make our staff feel comfortable coming and saying, I feel weak in this area. And them knowing from us, the answer is going to be, that's okay. I'm going to help you with this. What are some supports that you would like? And not fearing, admitting that I'm not feeling strong in this area. Can you help me? Not fearing that that's going to be held against them or looked down upon. It's just being honest. I also do think, too, this is a component, John, that we got to look at. The standards are small. Yes, they are absolutely small in the grand scheme of all of this. But we need to look at what are some building block things that our kids missed when they were normally in that classroom that we know is going to create a gap. So when they move on to the next level of class work that they need, if they did not have this component, they are really going to struggle. So having that communication from the previous grade to the next grade, or if you're in high school and your classes build on one another in content, having that communication where you're telling that teacher that's going to have them next, hey, this did not get covered like they're probably going to need. And then that way we can make sure we're doing some spiral review and getting those areas covered, because that's one area I am concerned of, is the gaps that can be created. And if we don't fill in the gap, it's going to stay there. And then it might go a little wider. And then another thing that I'm going to look at too, our corporation has talked about having a plan with devices in our elementary, starting with kindergarten with iPads, Chromebooks for the upper grades in elementary. So I know that our kids are going to need some practice on that. So if there's software we're going to use, we need to be practicing, getting on how to click buttons, how to utilize it, so that whenever this moment does come, our kids are feeling a little more comfortable, and we can hopefully decrease frustration, anxiety kicking in because we practiced it in class together.
And I know we've talked about that several times in here about, having that starting point, having practiced it, setting those norms and expectations, and making sure everybody's on the same page. Let's start to kind of wrap things up a little bit, because I know we've talked a lot about a lot of different things, and I think that a lot of this stuff is really, I think a lot of these are a lot of needs that we have, right? And I think that sometimes we feel a little lost or left out because you don't have all the answers. This isn't what you signed up for. You didn't sign up to be a distance ed teacher, right? This is all new for all of us, and it's tough. And Natosha, I'm glad you brought up the evaluation. I wanted to bring that up. I was thinking about that earlier this morning, and I'm like, I just cannot bring that up because it has, sometimes that's a real tough topic to deal with. But, I think that we definitely need to be able to reach out and get that help from whoever, and it not be held against us. That was a great point. I tell you what I'd like to do as we just kind of start winding down a little bit. Definitely keep reaching out through the So We Lead Twitter handle at So We Lead, and just kind of drop in those things that you're looking for. We may be able to connect you with somebody or somebody else following it. Say, oh, I know this. I think somebody brought up Flipgrid earlier, and Nate's like, yep, I'm an ambassador. I can do that for you, right? And somebody brought up Loom, and I know Amy uses Loom or has had some time with Loom. So I know there's people out there that all you have to do is kind of say what you're looking for. And if you could just keep putting those needs out there, it may not be an immediate thing that we find, but we definitely can start, making those connections. And that is one of the powers of this group, because we have so many outside connections, and we brought so many people from a very diverse group in together. So I think that's really good. I would just like to kind of take a second here. Does anybody have some parting shots or some final comments before we wrap it up and let Natosha close us out? Anybody got anything else they'd like to add to the conversation here? Yeah, Nate says he'd love to learn how to Zoom or Loom. So there's obviously people that will help him out with that. Yeah, Marianne. Okay, there you go. There's another one. Excellent. Anybody got anything they'd like to share before we wrap up? All right, Natosha, then, why don't you take us out, kind of close this up and kind of give us your final thoughts.
Hey, everyone, I want to just thank you for what you do for our kids. They are all our kids. You start off and you get your student roster, but within a couple of days, they become your kid. I love hearing how you guys have checked in on your students. I love that your heart shows through. I can tell you guys are getting weary and tired. I have felt that same way. And there are times that there are roles we take on that we did not sign up for. But no one was predicting that sorry, I got a kid at the front door and I'm giving them the right finger, not this one, to wait just a minute. But there's times in our lives that things don't go as anticipated and planned, but we have to roll with it. And I have been so impressed how teachers have rolled with this situation. John, I mean, you could ask corporations to try to roll in a circumstance like this, and they would not have been, picked themselves up by the bootleg and just start going for it. So I was so impressed with how everyone came together and unified in this to do what's best for kids. The only thing I wish that my regret is I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. That has really bothered me because those kids, they loaded up. We were anticipating getting them back before they were, and it did not work out that way for this school year. But if any of you do have things, I just want to share this, that you want support from your administrator, never feel bad going to them and asking or having conversations. That is how we grow and develop. That's how we supply you the needs that you need. We are here to support you as we support our students, our families, and community. And when we're able to effectively support you, you're able to support your kids, your family, your community too. So please feel free to always reach out to your admin, let them know those things that you do need that extra for, because that's our role. That's what we're called to do in that transition. And I think, John, a lot of times we think the administrator always has to be the person up front, but I see leadership as that role transitions many times. So when we do move to these forms of things that individuals are strong on, you probably per se won't see your principal leading the PD on it because they don't have that expertise that their colleague teacher in their building does. So that is that opportunity where the role transitions. They take the back seat with being up front. They give that to the teacher to lead that PD, but they come alongside them and give them the support that they need along the way. But I just want to tell you guys, thank you for everything you do. You are amazing. I really enjoy these meetings. The first time I've talked this much, but I'm always taking notes on things that you say. Heck, extend the invite to some of your principals. Let them join in and see some of the things that are being discussed. And I'm seeing it as an opportunity of growth for myself, John.
Oh, thank you. Hey, and one last note here: if you have not signed up for, if you did not register, you definitely want to make sure to do that so you get your PGP points. And Amy just put that link up in the chat. So before you leave, definitely grab that if you haven't already done so. Natosha, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming up here and sharing all this. And I hope that all of us got some things that we now know what we need to be looking for, and we'll start helping each other find those needs. You guys are more than welcome to hang out with each other and continue that conversation. I'm going to go downstairs and see if I've got Mexican now. It's about time for that. Thank you guys. I appreciate all your time. Thanks.